How many of you have been to SRAC before? How many is this the first time you've been to SRAC? Thank you so much for coming out in the weather and coming to find out about it. I really appreciate that. My name's Twigg. I'm the executive director here at SRAC. And if you followed us at all, we've been around since 2005. And what got me started was Spanish Hill. I've been studying Spanish Hill for the past decade. And as I was studying Spanish Hill, I came across this report. I got it from the Tioga Point Museum. And it is a part of the whole story of Spanish Hill. We'll touch on that at the very end. I'm going to be doing this presentation with Mr. Dick Cowles. I came across the Cowles family when I found out that Ellsworth, Dick's father, actually found the village site below Spanish Hill. And lo and behold, Ellsworth had already passed away, but Dick invited me to come up and see him, and after we sat and chatted for a while, Marcia, Dick and I, by darn if he didn't take me down in the cellar, and there were 3 rooms of artifacts left by Ellsworth. And that's the beginning of why SRAC came about. This is another character in my life. If any of you have followed me at all, you know that this was the inspiration for me. Louise Wells Murray. And she died just a month before the Griffin Report began, before James Griffin came to town. And I just want to read this, as a salute to Louise. And this was written by the Society of Pennsylvania Archaeology in 1931. It says, "The death of Mrs. Louise Wells Murray on April 22nd, 1931, removed from the Society of Pennsylvania Archaeology and from the field of Pennsylvania archaeology and history generally, one of its most valuable and forceful characters. No record has been kept of all the newspaper articles and various addresses which she prepared and presented for the sake of truth, seldom receiving in return. Many of these are preserved for reference in her museum. She often laughingly declared was to be her monument. A better one would be difficult to erect. There she spent her last evening on earth planning new work, having remarked she did not have enough to do." She died in April, and in May, in walks James Griffin. In 1927, James Griffin actually went to school to pursue a business degree in Chicago, and then he transferred to a general science bachelor's by the time he got done. By 1930, he graduated from the University of Chicago with a master's degree in sociology and anthropology. In 1931, like I said, a month after the crushing blow of losing Louise, James Griffin came to the valley where he conducted field studies for the Tioga Point Museum until early July of that same year. That report about this field study was never published. Interestingly enough, James Griffin went on to become a huge name in anthropology and archaeology. And so the idea that this wasn't ever published seemed to be a thorn in his side throughout his life. And it comes back into play many times. I'm just going to read a little bit of this. This was his own words. This was his introduction to the report that he did write. He said, "The archaeological fieldwork conducted by the Tioga Point Museum at Athens, PA during the early summer of 1931 was planned by Louise Wells Murray, late director of the museum. An application was made to the National Research Council, Division of Anthropology and Psychology, for funds to carry on field work in the vicinity of Athens. The purpose of the work was primarily to educate the local community to the value of the Aboriginal remains, to stimulate active interest in the wealth of archaeological material in the region, and to demonstrate as far as possible methods of recovering and preserving the cultures of the Indians. Secondarily, but less so, was the desire to obtain additional information as to the cultural sequences of the Chemung Susquehanna Valley and to acquire additional material from the museum. The unfortunate death of Mrs. Murray in the early spring was a distinct loss to the community and to the fieldwork. The difficult job of taking over Mrs. Murray's work was capably taken by one of her daughters, Miss Jessie Wells Murray, to whom the grants of the National Research Council were made. Here's the team. I want to thank the Cowles family because, you know, Ellsworth, in the end, was only involved with this research project the first week. However, he was given his own copy of all the photos from the Griffin Report. And so you're going to see some really high quality and good images for this presentation. This is one of those. The Griffin's team picture, and these guys are out at the Murray Farm. And I'm just going to name these guys off real quick. This is George Rump, James Griffin, M.L. Gore, who many of you have probably heard of before, T. Welch, Ed Castleberry. What a dapper guy. Isn't he just a dapper guy? I like him. That's 31, you know. He's waiting for the 50s right there. Oops. And then Dale Woodruff over here. And we'll talk about Dale again before the night's over. Basically, the report covers 4 main sites and then diddles around in a couple other sites as well. And these are the 4 sites that I'm going to talk about tonight. The Abbey Brennan site, really it was just the Brennan site there. The Abbey part didn't come in until 1933, 34. But I put it there because some people might know it by that name. And that's actually located right here. In this area, obviously, is the Tioga Point area. Okay? So, right on Main Street there, on the west side of the Susquehanna River, the Abbey Brennan site. Then we have the Murray Farm site, so if you went across the Chemung, over on the western side of the Chemung, that's where the Murray Farm site would be, BR5. Top of Spanish Hill, BR27, not to be mistaken for BR28, which is the village site below. And then, interestingly enough, he says BR41, the Thurston Farm. Well, really the Thurston Farm is over here, but BR41 is registered by Pennsylvania, is actually down here in Sugar Creek in Towanda. So, actually that whole section of his report didn't use the right identification. We're going to start out with the Abbey Brennan site, and if you look up here,